Welcome to my channel. If you're coming back, then welcome back. It's good to have you here. Admittedly, I had no idea what to do this video about today. I missed last week's video. I was a little crazy busy that week. I was only home for 2 days, and so I didn't quite get to making a YouTube video, but I'm sorry. Here I am, making up for it. Not quitting. Um, so, uh, today's video, I've kind of decided that I want to share a bit of my testimony with you guys. So basically, I'll be explaining how I got to this point in my life. Generally speaking about the most recent season God has put me through and what I've learned from it. And yeah, hopefully in some way or another, you would be inspired by this to just trust God in those tough moments, in those confusing moments when you're not quite sure what to do. And I guess that's all I have to say for the intro. So let's get into it. I grew up in the church. My parents went to church. My mom worked for the church for a period of time. So I would spend a lot of church at the one I grew up in. So I got very comfortable with that building and the people there, which is a good thing. It's great to be comfortable at church. But kind of as a result of that, I found was that I didn't really view the church as an environment for me to grow closer to God in. Um, I mean, it had nothing to do with that church. I love that church. It's actually a great church. Um, but it was more about how I had grown complacent and didn't expect anything out of the people that I've grown up with that I saw every single day. But there was a moment in time when my family actually started to church hop. We just didn't feel like that was our place there anymore. So I don't know for how long exactly. I don't remember it all too well, but for a few years we church hopped, and there were some good churches that I'd found. Um, but ultimately, we went back to the same church. We returned, and it was probably 2 or 3 years later, maybe even more than that. So there was all sorts of new people there that I had never met before. There was people who had already been there, but I just hadn't noticed. Um, and I guess the difference is my mom no longer worked there. I wasn't really in the behind the scenes locations all that much. I was just in the youth group. I was a normal student, finally. And as I went to that new youth group, I found friends, found some good Christian friends. And I loved those friends. I still love them. They're great. Um, I don't talk to a lot of them anymore, and we'll get into that. But um, they're great people, awesome people. And going back to how I never really viewed that church as a place to connect with God as a community. Um, I never even had a personal relationship with Jesus myself up until 3, 4 years ago. And what had gotten me to that place was, um, at least what had gotten me to deciding to become a Christian was actually my addiction to pornography. So I had a really, really bad struggle. Um, at this point in my life where I would view it multiple times a day, and it was just so instant. It was reactive. It was instinctual for me, and just the second I got the urge, wouldn't even put up a fight. Um, and it got really hard because naturally, anybody who is dealing with that deep of sin, yet are surrounded by Christians, I feel would get a lot of weight placed upon themselves. And at least I definitely found myself to have a lot of weight on my shoulders. A lot of it, what I had put there myself. And I just felt such a weight of expectation to follow all the rules of religion, of the Christian walk. I knew I shouldn't do it. I knew that it was bad for me to do that. I knew that it was doing things to my brain that would affect my relationships and has affected my relationships ever since then. Right. And um, at that point, I was really torn between two worlds. Part of me was getting to the point where my sexual desire, my sexual sin was enticing to me, and I was getting used to being in it. Right. And I was looking outwardly into the realm of sexual immorality. Um, and it seemed appealing to me at the time, because I had done it so much, so often, you know, I was so involved in it. And yet I was trying to play the other side of that, being in church. I was trying to be the good Christian. Um, and as a result of that, I had come to a point where I was just totally and completely done. Like no person can serve two masters. you know, for either he will love the other and hate the one, or he will hate the other and love the one. And I was definitely at that point where I was hating Jesus. I was. There's no way around it. Um, at that time, I had no relationship with him. I had no relationship with Jesus at that time. I was in a emotional state of faith. I was seeking emotional highs from godly experiences. And I thought that was my faith. And I also sought after validation in my peers, being a high schooler who had gotten a whole new friend group. I was excited. Before then, my friend group that I started high school with, that I was in middle school and the start of high school with, we had stopped talking pretty much altogether. I was basically excommunicated from the group, and that hurt a lot. And so these new church friends, I got super excited about. It's like, ooh, yeah, I have new friends, like new people in my life, and they're really cool, you know. And so I had gotten almost obsessed with living out my faith through them. Right. So where I was seeking those emotional spiritual highs and living my faith out completely through my friends. And it wasn't that kind of a relationship. They were just a bunch of high school kids, same as me. I looked at them to leadership. I looked at them to what to do. But they honestly were not in that position of church leadership to lead me because they were in the same stage of life as I was. Right. And it's not to say that people who are the same age as you can't be further than you spiritually and further along and help you through things. They certainly did. Um, but instead of taking that wisdom, instead of taking their example and going towards God, I would just go to them and myself, um, for my own pleasure and for just the feeling of Christianity. Like I feel like a Christian. Um, but I didn't know I was. I didn't know if I was going to heaven or not. I couldn't answer that, um, because I didn't have a relationship with Jesus. Like, this is what it all goes back to. But ultimately, I got to a point where I needed to decide if I wanted to just keep living this way. And I knew that I had to get rid of one or another. Like, I couldn't keep living this way. And I got to a point where I was seriously considering just leaving Christianity altogether, completely leaving the faith. And ultimately, I decided not to, as you could probably tell. But in that moment, I had chose to give God one more chance because I knew in the back of my head I hadn't given him an actual try. I haven't genuinely sought after Jesus with my own heart. And so I just gave him another try. But I didn't think anything would happen, right? I was like, okay, I'll give it a try to say that I tried. And then when I inevitably fail, I would walk away then, because it's like, okay, like now I have or now I have an excuse to walk away. That's what I was seeking. Um, so I was like, okay, God, I'll give you one good, honest try. And God took me on a ride. So, at the time I was serving on my youth group worship team, and man, my idea of worship was so unhealthy at the time. I was not satisfied with the way that our church was worshiping. I only wanted to sing the songs that I liked. But that's not the point of worship. I didn't know that at the time, but the point of worship isn't to sing songs you like or anything like that, especially in the singing worship. There's other types of worship, but when you're singing and praising God, it's about God. It doesn't matter what song you're singing. I mean, in some ways, it does matter that you're singing an actual worship song, and not just an anthem or a Christian related song. But other than that, it doesn't matter about what the song is, right? If the song is about praising God, then that's all that matters because you're praising God in that moment, right? But for me, it wasn't like that. I was really getting into my music phase, I guess you could say, and I was not satisfied. I was like, nope, I like these few certain songs, and we aren't playing them. I don't like that. So I was searching. I was trying to make like my own type of worship group. And in my head, I was thinking, man, like this is going to be so great. We're going to get a bunch of people together. We're going to get instruments, like basement worship. Like I've seen it on Instagram. I've seen it on um, all these places. And it just looks so cool. It looks so fun. I wish I could do that. But then, like, I could control it. That was my idea behind it. It was like, oh, I could control what songs we were playing and not playing. And I'd be in charge of it all. So it wasn't for God, it was for me to get what I desired. That's not worship. So anywho, I was looking to start or join a worship small group like that, and wasn't really working out. I was really struggling, and like I said again, my pornography addiction, my sexual temptations, and that whole part of my life began to bleed through into my actual life. The things that I tried to keep deep, deep down inside in the darkness, they're not going to stay there, right? You can try all you want to hide all that you can, but it's going to bubble up to the surface. It's going to leak through. And so I had just, people could tell, people could tell that I was involved with that was what I had on my mind, that was pretty much all I cared about. And it had led to some breaking of relationships. And it was completely valid because I was not respecting relationships. I was not respecting the people around me, and it needed to happen. Right. So things were not going so well in church. And I was like, man, I just need to start over. That's what I need to do. I just need to completely clear the slate, go to another place, be different. I'm done with these guys. So I had heard about this other church that did have a worship small group. And I was like, oh, perfect. I'll go there. Like, back when we church hopped, my family and I, we actually went to this church and it was pretty good. So I was like, okay, it's fine. Like, same denomination, which is non-denominational, but same church, basically, different people, different things, restart. That's all I liked. So I went there for a few services, and do not do this. Do not do this. For one, if you're in a place of struggle, do not leave your church. Seek out church leadership and seek out help through the church. Do not leave the church that you're at unless they're biblically unsound, and that's another issue. But if you're struggling in your faith and you're planted in a church, try to reach out to good Christian mentors and people who can help you and pray for you and lead you in that time of uncertainty. I think there's I can't remember where it's from, but I think I saw this YouTube video once, and it was talking about major decisions in a Christian's life. And the good rule to follow is do not make any massive decisions when you are struggling in your faith. Like, do not. That is pretty sound. At least like in your life and in your area of life. Like, do not quit your job if you are really just struggling in your faith area, and it's just like complete mess with God. Like, anything that would stem out of a dwindling relationship of God, other than rekindling it, probably not the best idea if it's a major life decision. But my point is, I was young, I was bullheaded, I was convincing, and I was just totally done. So I had decided to go to this church because of the worship that they had. Horrible, horrible way to determine whether or not a church is a good fit for you. I mean, if you have a passion for worship, it might be a factor, but it is not the sole deciding factor of whether or not you should go to that church, because worship is just a little footnote on what is important to look for. But I had decided to go to this church, and shortly afterwards, thought I had it all figured out. Completely lost contact with almost every single old friend of mine. that I'd relied so heavily on. Right? I didn't want anything to do with them, but secretly I wanted them to accept me, to praise me, because I was selfish. I was very selfish. And I didn't have that anymore. I didn't have even the chance of validation anymore because they had X'd me out of their life, And that really hit me. That hit me where it hurt. And as a result of that, I became alone. I was isolated. I wasn't alone, but I was isolated. I was at this new church. I had no friends, nobody from my old life, and I had no idea what I was doing. I thought I did. I carried myself like I did. I was like, okay, whatever. I can restart. Put me on the worship team. I'm like, nope. I asked. I was like, hey, like, can I be on the worship team? Like, I was on the worship team at my last church. Blah blah blah. They were like, slow down there. Let's wait maybe 6 months, and then we could see about you getting in and serving a little more. I was like, that's shut down. I saw this couple of teens or whatever, but the problem was I was no longer a teenager. I was a young adult, so I tried just fitting in with the youth group kids, and stuff, and they looked at me like I was crazy. They're like, who's this strange man who I've never seen before in my life? I don't want to talk to you. Like, what? And I just went up to them and I was like trying to be like, oh yeah, like, let's be friends, whatever. It was a very weird and almost forceful way, I remember. And they completely shut me down. And very quickly, I realized that this church would not be like my last one. I realized that I could not put on a face. I could not be all fine and dandy and everybody would go along with it because they were just used to me. But at this new church, they were not used to me. I was new. So, that was where I was. I was isolated, away from the thing that I cared about the most in life at that time, and just had no idea what I was doing. I was devastated. I was just desperate for anything, anyone, and I was just scared. I didn't know what to do. Like, I had no clue what was going on anymore, you know? Um, and this could have easily been the straw that I chose that was like, okay, by Christianity, But for some reason, I never thought about that. I don't think I was looking for a way out anymore. I was just looking for a new comfort inside of that because I liked being in control. And when I was in control, it was easy for me to leave. But now that I wasn't in control, it was very difficult for me to leave because this was the only place I had now. Socially, like physically, anywhere. This is the only place I had. I didn't have any friends from school anymore. I didn't have any friends from church. I was hanging out with my brother, which I love. But at the time, I really, really wanted friends. um, but yeah, every single time I tried to make a new friend, just fell flat on its face. And each sermon at this church, man, the pastor was good at getting under your skin. He was good at kind of pushing you, getting you out of your comfort zone. And I love that. I love it when pastors can push their congregation, because certain words can move you, but other words, can bring you to action. And this guy, he was really good at bringing you to action. But every single Sunday I came back, I just felt more and more like it was hitting me, you know? Um, it was kind of like pecking away at me, like the guilt, you know? And he wasn't preaching like you're guilty, blah blah blah. He was very good doctrinally, but the more and more he preached the truth, the more and more I saw what was still in me that was weighing me down, what was still in me that I was carrying that I couldn't carry any longer. And for some reason, I just found a new curiosity in this place. Like I looked inwardly, but not in the man, what can I do for my benefit kind of way. Like I looked inwardly and I questioned, like, who is God? You know? Like what do I do? Where do I fit in to all of this? You know? Um and I just decided, man, these sermons have been pecking away. Have been really good. I'm just really feeling it. Why don't I try and learn more? So I dove in. I joined the young adults group there, uh, which happened to be led at the time by the lead pastor and his wife in their home. So you can imagine how that felt going into a pastor's home every Monday night. I was freaking out. I was like, oh my goodness. Ugh. But regardless, we had some really, really good nights of study, of just getting in the Word, getting out in the open, and it was a space for me to actually unwind. So now, looking back at least, I realized that in that moment, in that time, God had separated me from the place where I was so comfortable and the people that I depended so much on in order for me to grow. And this church, this new one that I was at, was the perfect place for me to grow. I mean, honestly, I felt a new breath of curiosity and desire to know God, to know Jesus, you know? And I found it. You know, they were very hard on do it yourself. Like you can come here, we'll support you 100%, but look at this yourself. They spoke in a way that sparked wonder in me, and I wanted to find out more about it. You know, the more they spoke, the more questions I had, the more I looked into it. And honestly, I was there for 2 years. In those 2 years, um, I had grown so much in my faith. And at that point, I was a baby Christian. I had actually gotten baptized a second time just before I left my old church. And it was just like my commitment to God. I was just saying, you know, let's see what this is about. You know, let's do this. God, I'm all in. You know, I'm wanting to genuinely learn who you are and get to know you. I want to know what it's like to be a Christian. Because I'd spent 17 years, yeah, about 17 years just attending church. I wasn't Christian. I'll tell you that much. I wasn't. But as soon as I made that turn, as soon as I gave it a genuine shot and looked into it, I'd never gone back. And I was a new Christian at the time. I had known about Christianity, obviously, growing up in the church, but there was a whole new depth to it, a new whole perspective shift in my mind. And in those 2 years I was there, for one, I'd only met maybe one or two friends, people that I would actually consider like, okay, this is my friend. Other people, man, I'll tell you, that was a cowboy church. I do not get along with a lot of people. Not like I did get along with them, but I didn't relate to them. It was almost impossible for me to find somebody that I could become like hangout buddies with, like, oh man, like, let's hang out. Let's do this together. Let's do that together. We have this in common. We have this in common. The only thing I had in common with pretty much any of those people in that church was God. And I think that was just such a healthy environment for me at the time. And I needed that. I needed that isolation in order to grow on my own. I needed to separate from those people so that I could develop my own relationship with Jesus. And it was great because it was a perfect example of how the church should be as well. You don't have to be best friends with everybody at the church. You don't have to relate to everybody at the church. I was definitely the odd one out. Every so often, like, somebody would walk into young adults group and I somewhat relate to them, can like talk a little bit more. Like I said, like 3 to 4 people. I can count on one hand the amount of people that I could actually genuinely have a good conversation with, like see myself being friends with. But I didn't have to in order to grow closer to God, in order to feel at home in that church. Because we all had God in common. What mattered was I was in the environment I needed to be in to grow independently and collectively closer to God. And now I look back and I see what he had taught me, what he had brought me through. There's no way in any other circumstance that I would become self-reliant. Not self-reliant, but God-reliant. I had made my friends my God. And I was using Jesus as a cover for it. And I just think that was honestly the best and only way I could have gotten out of that situation. Like, I know I had to leave that church. I had to. For my benefit and everybody else's. That was the only way I could find my own walk with God. I totally see that now, looking back. That church isn't a bad. Church wasn't bad at all. I love that church. I literally just went there when I went back and visited my hometown. Just a month ago. It's a great church. I love that church. It was super fun. We had just hung out. Good sermon. Great. But at that time, it was not a good church for me. Doesn't mean it's a bad church. It just wasn't the right one for me. So I guess that's a more appropriate saying. It wasn't a bad church. It just wasn't the one I needed at the time. And I'm so thankful for that, because now I'm here and I've developed my own personal relationship with Jesus. And it's so crazy the depth of things that you can go into this. Like, I'm going into this and I'm finding out just so much about myself, about how I operate, how the flesh operates, and it's so interesting. Like, now I can look back and I can see whenever the temptations start rising up again, whenever I'm starting to feel stressed, whenever I'm starting to feel just exhausted and ready to be done with everything, I noticed, I haven't been reading my Bible every day. Probably has some sort of relation. And then I start reading my Bible consistently again, and I'm perfectly fine. I'm living life. It's great. That's literally the only thing I change, is whether or not I read my Bible. And that determines the entirety of quality of life for me. And it's just so cool because as you grow and mature, you begin to know yourself more because God reveals it to you. You know, He knows you better than you know yourself. I don't know the number of hair on my head. He does. Like, He knows you way better than you'll ever know yourself. And I'm just so thankful for that. And without it, man, I don't know where I'd be. But with it, I know I'm here. And I'm so grateful for it. Thank you guys for the opportunity I have to share this. And hopefully, I get far more opportunities to share all that I learn with you guys. Thank you so much for watching. God bless. Good night.